thank you for tuning in to the Roughnecks Podcast. I'm your host, Cole Nixon. I'm a senior at Ohio Wesleyan University in Delaware, Ohio, where I also play football. Just about every week on this podcast, I try to bring on guests who are viewed as leaders and motivators in the world of coaching, business, and just life. I talk to them and they share some advice for all of us. You can catch a new episode every Monday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Be sure to follow the Roughnecks Podcast on Instagram and Twitter. You can find us on Instagram at Roughnecks Podcast and Twitter at Roughnecks Pod C1. If you ever want to contact the Roughnecks, then message us on social media or email at roughneckspodcast@gmail.com. Let's get into this week's show. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to yet another episode of the Roughnecks Podcast. This is episode 15. It is the last episode of 2020. What a year 2020 has been. Am I right? I mean, this has been one hell of a year. We have all gone through so damn much, but this year is coming to a close, and hopefully 2021 will bring some better memories for everybody. This is just me this episode. I'm happy to say that there was some good in 2020, for me personally at least. I'm sure that you guys can find some good too. This podcast started back in September. From that point, this is now the 15th episode with over 7.5 hours of content. This is before this episode, so there's going to be even more than that. And thanks to an anonymous person, they wanted to make it sound better for us. I mean, I know sometimes it can sound a little rough. I've never had a mic, but somebody about 2 weeks ago, I got a package. I still don't know who sent it, and it was a Toner podcast microphone, which I am currently using to record this episode. I've used it a little bit on the last episode, but I had that episode pretty much recorded before I got the microphone. But I just wanted to say thank you to whoever sent it to me. It means a lot to me, and I hope that someday I'm able to repay you. I still have no clue who it is. I may never know who it is, but it means a lot to me that you sent it to me. But now we're going to get started with this week's episode. This is the last episode of 2020, so I figured we'd take a trip down memory lane with the podcast episodes that we've released so far this year, since there's not as many. But first, I want to start with some questions that I was asked on our social medias. So the first one was, why did you start the podcast? That's actually a really good question. I haven't been asked that a whole lot, but I've always been kind of like, I'd love to share it. I started a podcast one day for class. I had to do it. I did it for a music history class and one for an intro marketing class. I started a blog for another class and decided to continue with it, and it was a sports blog that eventually evolved into a podcast, and that was Fancy Week Sports, and it was also a YouTube channel. It was with Teddy, who originally started this podcast with me as well, but it became kind of too much to handle and too much to focus on. Like, it was just a sports blog and sports podcast. We focused a lot on football, as we still do on this podcast, but we've kind of shifted the mindset of it a little bit. And then sports being shut down due to COVID-19 didn't help. That's kind of when it kind of officially, Fanspeaks Sports officially kind of died out. I mean, it's dead now. I don't do anything with it. And then Teddy and I, one day we were talking when we got back to school this year, and I was like, you want to start a new one? Let's just start over. And we decided to restart and then took off from there. And I'm just going to continue with it. Teddy's no longer with it. He's got a lot going on. It's harder for him to do it. I still have free time. But he will definitely probably be back on an episode or two or probably more. But yeah, so that's kind of how it started. Let's see. Another one I got was, what's your favorite episode that you've made so far? Man, that's a hard question though, because I mean, everyone that I've had on, I've had a personal relationship with. Like, I know them, besides one person, I know them pretty damn well. There's one that kind of sticks out to me. I think it was episode 6. Yes, it was episode 6 with Chris Bonner. I think that was, I don't know if it was my favorite per se, but it felt personal. Teddy was there. We'll get into a little bit more about what actually like kind of went down when we go down memory lane, but it got deep, and there was a lot that people could take away from it, educationally and just like advice. And it was probably, I don't want to say it was my favorite episode because they're all near and dear to my heart. I'm very thankful for all my guests and every episode I've done, but that one is one that I think sticks out to me the most, and I think I personally have listened to it the most. Sometimes I listen to it when I'm having a hard day or something, and But there's multiple that I listen to when I'm having a hard day. But that one was probably the one that sticks out the most, I guess. I don't want to call it my favorite. A drunk college story. That's funny because I remember who asked me this, and it was the person who I just said was the one that stuck out the most. Chris Bonner asked me this, but I'm not going to give a drunk college story because I don't want to get myself in trouble. But I will say I had a lot of memories with people like Chris, Joe, Smoz, Harv, like all of them, Teddy, Dan, Nate. Like you guys all know who you are, but I had a lot of good memories on those Saturday nights. I'll say that. And you guys helped made those amazing. So that's all I'm going to say on that one. I'm not going to dive too much in that one. I don't want to get me or anybody else in trouble. Not that we did anything too crazy, but, some things are just left unsaid. This one, any general advice for future college students? Oh, man. Don't procrastinate. I was bad at it. I did it bad my freshman year. You think it's like high school, but it is, but it isn't. The classes are a lot harder. The professors are willing to help you. At least like my school, we're a smaller school. It's almost like that high school atmosphere a little bit, like where the professors will help you. But if you go to a big school, those professors aren't going to help you as much, as from what I've heard at least. And it's easy to dig yourself in a hole. And I did it. I dug myself in a hole. I was taking a lot harder classes than I thought they were. Then all of a sudden you get that your grade report and you're like, oh shit, like crap, like my grades aren't good. And it's super easy to put yourself in a hole, but super hard to dig yourself out. But it can be done. And the one thing too, I wish I figured it out earlier. I didn't really figure it out till my senior year, but don't be afraid to ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. It really is. Yeah, those are some of the things that I kind of learned. There's probably some people that can give you some other ones, but those are some personal things for me. Let's see. I think this is the last one. Yes, this is the last one. What do you want the future of this podcast to be? Man, I'd love for this to be something like Joe Rogan Experience or, Jocko Willick podcast, or let's just call it the Jocko podcast, or the Granger Smith podcast, or Be Bold, or like some of the ones that I listen to, or No Snooze. Those are some of the ones that I listen to that are great. I'd love for it to be like that. Like, that's my goal. And, like, everybody's got to have your goals. I'm going to take what I can get. I'm not there, and I may never get there. I hope I do get there someday, but right now I'm not there. I don't do this for attention or for money. I do this for fun, and I love doing it. It's one of the reasons that I have continued to do it. And I just want to bring on people for you as a listener that you guys can take something from it. And I take a lot from them personally, and if I can take something from it, then I know somebody else is taking something from it. It may not be the same way that I'm taking it, but there's a lot of learning that is done on podcasts. Podcasts are something like, from what I've been seeing, like they're like books. You can learn a lot from books, and that's something I've also took up is reading. Take up reading, and I've also, podcasts are huge learning, and I just want to help share some of, I have guests on that not normally would be guests. I feel like I have some people who you wouldn't look at and be like, oh, like that's a podcast guest right there. No, no offense to them, but I bring them on and they share like a different unique side to things. So that's what I want the future of this to be, like Joe Rogan, or to be like No Snooze, or be like Be Bolder. But I hope to get there one day, but I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and hopefully I can get there one day. But those are all the questions I have that I got. Let me know if you guys want me to do more stuff like this. Like, I like doing it. I have no problem doing it. I can do it on an Instagram live, or more podcast episodes like this, and where it's just questions and answers. I definitely need more questions, but if you guys have questions too, you can message us on social media, where, like I said, Instagram at Roughnecks Podcast, Twitter at Roughnecks Pod C1. And you can email the questions to roughneckspodcast@gmail.com. But let's get on to the recap of 2020. Man, what a year. We'll start with episode 1, which was Who Are the Roughnecks? That was just me and Teddy. I wanted to do an intro episode. It was kind of a test too, just to make sure we had everything going a little bit all right. We may need to remake it now because things have changed a little bit, but it is the 5th best episode that we had all year. And so It was just kind of a, who me and Teddy are. It was more messing around than anything. And if you know Teddy, and especially when Teddy and I get together, like that's just how it is. That's how we are. But it was a fun episode. I may have to make a new one like that. I may do the first episode of 2021 more about myself and more about what this podcast is. But I also have some other things lined up, which I'll get to eventually. But then we move on to episode 2. Episode 2 was with Joe Aichele, and Teddy was also there for that one. It was about Rudy, the true story of Rudy, and strength and conditioning. He was our first ever guest that we had on the podcast. First ever guest I've had on a podcast, really. I mean, I had fan speak, but those episodes I deleted, and I had a couple guests, but they were a couple buddies of mine. Not really great episodes. No offense to them. They weren't great episodes. I've learned a lot. If you're a podcaster, you learn a lot. Like, you can go back and listen to episode 1 to episode 14, 15. You see a difference in this podcast. You learn a lot each episode. He told a story about the real story of Rudy. If you haven't heard, you need to go listen to it, because the movie Rudy is not entirely true. Actually, most of it is just bullshit. And then he wraps up with some strength and conditioning tips. But there's also some good advice given about pushing yourself, and here is the clip.
I think that is one thing that every individual should do. Daily pushing yourself, whether it be physically, mentally, something challenging, and I just kind of got hooked on it.
That episode was also the second best episode we ever had in ever had, but also the second best episode of 2020. Then we move on to episode 3, which was the best episode we've ever had, which I know just makes our guests thrilled. Tyler Juju Shuster, that was episode 3. If you know Shuster, you know he's a clown, man. You get a laugh every time you're around Shuster. I love it. Schuster's a hilarious guy. He actually gives us a little bit of advice, too. He gives some quality life advice. And here is Tyler Schuster's advice about life.
You got to be happy, man. Got to be happy. Can't bring yourself down, because if you bring yourself down, you'll bring others down. It's not good.
Then we take a trip to episode 4, the Lost Badger. I bring on a old drinking buddy and just a buddy all around, Joe Yurik, and Teddy was also at this one. But I was on Facebook one day, and this, the podcast was still new at this point, and he shared a story about James White and his father, and this was after the death of James White's father. And I was like, man, I want to hear him talk about that. Like, he met James White, and it was his father was actually the one that helped Joe meet helped him meet James White. It was a really cool story. And he's a long time die-hard Cleveland fan, man. I'm sure he's thrilled right now with how the Cleveland Browns are doing, and hopefully the Cavs can follow that up with a little bit. But there was some parenting advice given by Mr. Yurik, and I don't think he realized he did it. And Joe is not a father, but here's the clip.
And the kids are always a reflection on the home. Kids are always a reflection on the home.
And we aren't trying to tell you how to parent your kid. And I can tell you that that's not what Joe's intentions was, but just know that your child is a reflection of you and how you were brought up. So if you are a parent out there listening, just remember that, because I know I am my mother's son and my father's son. I know I am. I have my flaws, but they raised me pretty good, I'd like to say. Just know your child is a reflection of you and how you raised them. Then we go to episode 5. I bring on Tom Watts, Coach Tom Watts. He is my head football coach up at Ohio Wesleyan University. I've been around him for 4 years now. Great person, awesome person. He's always willing to help you out. That's one of the main reasons I actually ended up choosing Ohio Wesleyan. I noticed that he was one of the few head coaches that actually talked to me, and he's showed that he had an interest not just in football. It wasn't just in your football ability. He wanted to know what you were doing after college, what your plans were. But he's a great person. He shares. I brought him on because I wanted him to talk a little bit about leadership, and he did a great job with it. And he also he's been around a lot of great people. He's been around Jim Tressel a lot, and if you know Jim Tressel, he's a great guy to be around. And he kind of took something called the Champions Manual, which I'll be honest, I didn't use as much in college. We got one every year for football. And there's a book that Jim Tressel has, I'm reading it currently. It's called The Winner's Manual. It's by Jim Tressel. It's about what they did at Ohio State. And I think Jim Tressel did it at Youngstown State when he was first coaching there too. And our coach does it. Coach Watts does it. It's really a great thing to have. Great book to read. I am using that Champions Manual so much more now, and it's something that you'll actually hear a little bit more about in 2021. The entire year of 2021 will be based kind of off of that Champions Manual. But he also shares a great story about when he met the boxing legend Muhammad Ali. There was something in that conversation with Coach Watts that really stuck out to me, and here it is.
Really, leadership comes, off the field, making some tough decisions, making some suggestions or comments that might not necessarily be the most popular opinion, and I think there's got to be some positivity with that. Obviously, too, someone that looks at things, half full, not half empty. I think that's an important part of being a good leader. But just, and honestly, a lot of it comes down to being consistent and being a great communicator and listener. There's a lot of parts to being a great leader.
There's so many different things that go into being a leader, but I think Coach Watts hits it right on the head with those things. Leaders are the ones who aren't afraid to step up and say something when no one else will, and you have to be able to consistently do that. You can't just do it once. Yeah, that might make you a leader a little bit, but you have to be able to consistently do that. Like, consistency is key. Then we go on to episode 6, which I talked about a little bit, called Making the Best of Things. Chris Bonner and Teddy was at that one as well. That was a fun episode. It, out of nowhere, took a turn and got deep. I don't think I've ever heard Teddy or Chris, to be honest, get that deep. But they spoke on a personal level, and I think that's what made that such a good episode, and I think that's what makes it stick out to me personally a little bit, because of the fact that I know those guys. Teddy can be a hard ass, Chris can be a clown, but they both spoke from their heart, and they both brought out a bunch of learning points that I feel like anyone like that listens to this episode can hear. And I feel like there isn't one little clip that can do this episode justice. You have to go listen to the whole episode to really understand it. But there is one that really stuck out to me personally that I think anyone could get some gain from.
But I think just really realizing that you literally can't do anything about it. So you might as well just try to make the best of it. And like the reason why like I was even able to like do a decent job at like filling that role is because like I was already so close with everyone on the team, like building that relationship with you, with, like I said, everyone I named, with Teddy, with Shane Quinn, those guys, you know what I mean? Like the fact that I was so close with them on and off the field, like that's what actually probably made it the easiest. Like if I didn't really know you guys all like that and like outcasted myself, and I probably would have not been able to talk to you guys the way I did.
Let me know if you guys want me to bring Chris back on. I'm thinking about bringing him back on in March. Not entirely sure yet, but you don't have to be afraid to tell me you don't want him on either. He won't be hurt. At least I don't think so. I don't know. But yeah, I might bring him back on in March. You guys might get to hear him again. Episode 7, The Journey, with Max Mordarski and Teddy as well. Me and Max came into Ohio Wesleyan together in the same year, but I wasn't really close with Max. He was a kicker, and I was a DB, and we didn't hang out with the same people as much. But him becoming a student coach and connecting with Teddy a little more made us start talking a little more. And I knew a little bit about his story, but I didn't know the whole story, I guess. Like, I knew he was hurt. I knew he wasn't going to play anymore, but I guess I didn't really know exactly what happened or how it happened. But he's been through a lot. He's been through a hell of a lot. It's definitely an episode that you need to hear to get the whole story, but listen to his advice for someone going through some adversity right here.
So someone going through adversity, I would just say find something that you want to do in the next year or two and just keep that as your goal. And however the cookie crumbles is how it crumbles.
Then we move on to episode 8. Coach Owen Fankhauser. He played at Ohio State, man. Coach O, I'm a defensive back at Ohio Wesleyan, and during my 4 years there have been 4 different corners coaches. All of them were great coaches. Nothing against any of those coaches. They were all great coaches. I mean, we had one who was a starter at Arizona in college. Like, he was the starting corner at Arizona. And then we had Coach O, who played at Ohio State. Like, those are our corners coaches that we have at Ohio Wesleyan. It's great. Coach O shares some great experiences from his time at Ohio State. But there was something that really stuck out to me that I think you all need to hear.
Like from my experience, I was told, no, if you're on something, you can get it. Like if you want something, if you want to be somewhere, if you want some like success in some way, work to get there. There's no way. It's all mind over body. Like if you want something, go get it. It's there. And that's from me being told no at Kent, me being told no the first time at Ohio State, me being told no on the baseball team at Kent. Fuel your fire. Let it push you to that next level and find ways to get there.
He was told no so many times, but he never gave up, and he ended up getting there. So that shows don't ever give up on your dreams. This podcast is a dream of mine, and I'm not going to give up on it because, like, that little quote right there, that what he said, you know, you're going to be told no, but he reminds all of us that, you know, you're going to get told no, and I think Artie Douglas says it, you're going to hear no more than you hear yes. But that yes is way more rewarding than those 100 no's. So don't ever give up on your dreams. Episode 9, Respect All, Fear None. Casey King, the military guy, Coach King, served in the Marine Corps. And it was only fitting that we recorded this episode on Veterans Day, which wasn't even planned. It just kind of worked out that way. And it actually was also the day after the Marine Corps' birthday, I believe, is what it was. But he has 26 years of experience in coaching as well as his military experience. You know that there are going to be many lessons to learn and to listen to in that episode. It was great, but here's one that really stuck out to me personally. But you have to listen to the whole episode to truly get that learning experience from Coach King. But here's what he said during Motivation Monday.
But one thing I prepared, and it's a saying that we have in the Marine Corps. And it's pain is weakness leaving the body, right? It sounds like something Coach D would say all the time. Pain is weakness leaving the body. And the question isn't how much more you can take, but how much more you can give. Just when you're ready to quit, your mind says push harder. You listen, sensing an inner strength that wasn't there before, and suddenly you discovered you no longer feel the pain. It's just working through the pain, man.
Episode 10, It's a Great Day to Be You, Morgan Cotter. Man, this was a super fun episode to record. I think I don't know if I stopped laughing. This was almost this funny. Actually, I think this was more funny than recording with Tyler Shuster. He has some hilarious stories about getting his first job, wearing pool clothes, to a funny story about when he got told to shut the fuck up by Super Bowl MVP James Harrison, who he played with at Kent State. But there's a really good point at the end of the episode that he shares that I think we all need to remember, especially in a year like 2020.
And if you can wake up every morning with whatever it is, and two things, it's either a great day to be whoever you are, or it's a great day to be alive, because every day is a great day to be alive. Travis Tritt song. I know you're a good country boy.
Oh yeah.
The Travis Tritt song would be a great day to be alive. And those two things remind me of my mom, who is and always will be the toughest person I was ever around. But if you can wake up every morning with that idea, it's a great day to be whoever you are, and it's a great day to be alive, you're definitely going to put yourself in a position to be successful in whatever you do that day.
Now we move on to episode 11. This was my first attempt. This is now my second attempt currently, but my first attempt at doing an episode solo. Never done it before. Never. It's been. It was a little rough. Let's just say that. I'm gonna be honest. I know it was. It didn't get the listens that I wanted, and I didn't really expect it. You know, it's just me, but it was a learning experience, just like everything, you know. And it just recording that episode myself, I learned through that episode more, not just about the podcast, but just in life. And it was about finding your why. And, you know, why do you exist? Why do you do what you do? Why do you have this passion? And it's sometimes people are like, oh, I'm passionate about it, but why? You have to figure out your why, figure out what, and anything, business, school, anything, figure out your why. You're going to expect some more of those episodes in 2021, and I can promise you that they will more than likely be better. I'm working at making these a little bit better of an episodes. But then we move on to episode 12, Attack, Attack, Attack. Cam Smith. Cam has been a longtime friend of mine. He is 2 years younger than me, and I was lucky enough to play in high school with him. We played football together in high school. believe only for 1 year really, because I didn't play varsity as a freshman. I only played as a sophomore. But we played together 1 year in high school, and then a couple years down the road, we ended up going to college together. We got to play 2 years of college football together. I enjoyed my experiences with him. He is now the head football coach, as well as helping out with the all sports strength and conditioning, as well as helping out with softball at Denville High School. But he gives some great life advice for all of us right here.
Whatever you're going to do, whatever your next job is, whatever you got to go do at work that day, or your schoolwork, or that paper that you're dreading to write, that conversation that you're dreading to have with a parent or a significant other or friend or whatever the hard thing is, or even whatever the good things are, go attack it.
And it goes to show that even some of these younger guys can give you some good advice. Now, whether we follow that advice, that's still up for debate. It's more pointed at myself and not Cam. I know he attacks everything he does in life, and that's probably why this is the 4th best episode that the Roughnecks podcast had this year. Now we move on to episode 13. We're almost to the end. Episode 13 was Only My Best with Artie Douglas. I first met Artie when I was finishing up my junior year of high school, I believe. Yes, junior year. I did football and speed training to try and get myself ready for my senior year, as well as help me prepare to be recruited. I was hoping, I had higher hopes than than I should have, to be honest. Everybody thinks they're a D1 athlete till they realize, oh shit, I'm not a D1 athlete. I had that real quick realization when I went to a D3 college and realized this is D3, I could never play D1. And I was doing that, and I'm gonna admit, I was slacking a little bit. I had kids I was a junior. There was probably, I think, freshman was the next oldest, to me. And so I was faster than all of them. I will, not trying to be cocky or anything, but I would slack a little bit, because I could get away with it because I knew I'd win. But he came in, he's older than I am, and he's in college, or I believe he's in college or out of college at this point. And, he'd come in and run with us, and I'd get pissed. I could never beat the guy. I still probably couldn't beat the guy. He's a hell of a lot faster than me, but he helped me push myself. I think it really helped me boost myself, so I thank him for that. But after that, he actually went on to start his own company with his dad who just happens to be James Buster Douglas. And if you don't know who that is, go search his name, and you will get to see him knock out Mike Tyson. But Artie started his apparel company called Only My Best. Man, you got to go check out their gear. They got some great stuff. And make sure you follow them on social media at Only My Best. And here is Artie's tip of the day.
You're going to hear no a lot more than yes. You just got to keep pushing, keep digging, keep driving, keep running. No should be more of a drive for you.
Our most recent episode 14, Refused to Be Written Off, with Richie Worship. Richie Worship was a D1 football player at Purdue University. He played, I think he said running back, fullback, special teams. He was that utility guy. He was a tough motherfucker. I'll say it. I don't even know the guy, but I know he was a tough motherfucker. He ended up being lucky enough to start for the Boilermakers. I have never met him. And there was one day, Chris from episode 6, who I've talked a lot about on this episode. I definitely probably got to get Chris back on. But Chris messaged me and was like, hey, I got a buddy from high school that went on to play at Purdue. I could probably get him on the podcast. And I was like, hell yeah. But Richie never met the guy. He played in high school with Joe from episode 3 and Chris from episode 6. Never met the guy, but super great guy. Super willing to talk. I loved it. Unfortunately, went through some injuries. And, there was one thing in that exit interview that I talked about on the episode where, his injuries, basically, he was out for a couple years and didn't see the field, and then he ended up just having to give it up because his injuries were just too much. And there was one thing, I read in the exit interview, they asked him, do you feel like, how do you feel about your injuries shortening your career or something like that? And he goes, I'm not disappointed in it because it was a big learning experience, and that mindset right there just shows the type of person that he is. And that's why at one point or another, we're all going to be wrote off. Somebody's going to say you're not good enough or you're done, but Richie tells us right here why you should not allow that.
I didn't give up on myself. It was taking me so long where it was, all right, yeah, he's not coming back. he's done, you know? And I told myself, I'm like, I'm not going to let that happen. Like, I refuse to let that happen. I refuse to just be written off. Like, no, not going to happen.
And that leads us to now, episode 15, the recap and a little bit of questions. Over the past 15 weeks, we have had many different guests, from coaches ranging from high school to even college to even assistant coaches and even some student coaches. And then we have D1 athletes. You know, we have people who played a while ago, who played with Super Bowl MVPs, who were just that special teams guy, who were D1 running backs, who we've had business people, we've had CEOs, we've had entrepreneurs, we've had everything. And that's kind of what I want this podcast to be. And I love that we've had so many willing guests to come on. I mean, yeah, we've had a lot of football-oriented people. Don't get me wrong. I'm a football guy. I know a lot of football people, but that's going to change slightly in 2021, but we won't stray too much from the athletes. Most of my people are going to be athletes because, in my opinion, you learn a lot about life through athletics. And I believe that every single one of my guests can attest to that. I have some great people lined up in 2021. I actually just finished filling up January. I just have to fill one more slot in February. I got some people I got somebody that started multiple businesses. I got somebody who records videos and edits videos for Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett, the stud for the Cleveland Browns. Like, he does that. I got somebody who's a coach at Ohio Wesleyan. Another coach from Ohio Wesleyan. I got somebody who's a diehard Brown fan who's going to share his passion and why you need to have a passion. I got military. I got high school Hall of Fame football coaches, high school Hall of Fame baseball coaches. I got a SWAT member I'm going to try and get on. I got somebody that is in venture capital that in the Midwest, if you know anything about venture capital in the Midwest, then you're going to know exactly who I'm talking about, who I'm going to try and get. I got people that I'm going to try and get lined up for you guys, just for you guys to learn. People that are entrepreneurs, athletes, coaches, military, and even people that are retired. I got a lot of different things lined up. There's going to be a little different approach taken, not much, but each month is going to have a topic in mind. Now, that's going to be something like gratitude, passion, toughness, adversity, and there's a bunch of different ones. And then these are things I'm taking out of the Champions Manual. If you guys don't know what the Champions Manual is, I hope to, like, one day maybe create a Champions Manual of my own. Even Jim Tressel says it, and I guarantee Coach Watts will talk about it, or will attest to this too. You know, there's not one set Champions Manual that you can have. There's a lot of different ones, and it depends on who you have and who it's for, and everybody's Champions Manual is going to be a little bit different. I can go into a whole lot into the Champions Manual, but each month's going to have that little topic, and you know, the whole month isn't going to be like we only talk about that topic. You know, we're only going to talk about toughness. It's going to kind of have the same setup. You know, I'm going to let them share their stories a little bit, but the questions I ask them are going to be focused more on that and what makes you tougher? How do you handle adversity? Or what was the toughest adversity you ever had to deal with, and how'd you get out of it, and stuff like that. But I'm super excited to share what I got in 2021 and what 2021 has to offer. But with that being said, it is time for Motivation Monday, just because it wouldn't be a typical Roughnecks podcast if we did not have Motivation Monday. But I got a quote out of the Champions Manual, of course. Quote comes from the section titled Handling Adversity, because 2020 has been crazy, but it says, comfort and prosperity have never enriched the world as much as adversity has done. 2020 has been one hell of a year. It definitely hasn't been the easiest, but John Wooden says it best. Why do we dread adversity when we know that facing it is the only way to become stronger, smarter, and better? Take this year as a learning experience. Think of the good things. Think of the positive. This year is only leading to great things in the year of 2021. With that, that's a wrap on episode 15 of the Roughnecks Podcast. You know what? Actually, that's a wrap on 2020 for this podcast. Thank you to everyone who was a guest on this show and those who have helped. Thank you, Teddy, Coach Aichele, Shuster, Joe, Coach Watts, Captain Bonner, Max, Coach O, Coach King, Coach Cotter, Artie, and Richie. Thank all of you. Thank you to whoever sent me this microphone. Thank you to PNH Studio for the logo, BaddPodd and YourPodcastEditor for editing a couple episodes for me. Most importantly, thank you to you. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like this podcast, make sure you subscribe, make sure you rate, make sure you review so you don't miss any of our future episodes. A new episode comes out every single week on Monday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Of course, you got to go follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We just started Twitter. Help us get our followers up. Instagram is at Roughnecks Podcast. Twitter at Roughnecks Pod C1. Happy holidays to everyone. Stay safe out there in the holiday season. I know where I'm at right now, the roads are a little rough. We had a white Christmas, but it definitely made those roads a little hard to drive on. But we will see you next year. But for now, you know the deal. For now, Roughnecks out.